We're going on a magical adventure today to learn who is real Indian. Some people think the Dravidians, a group of people, were the first to live in India. Others believe the Aryans, who came from a faraway land called Europe, might have been first. But remember, these are just guesses and might not be absolutely right. What's really is that both people from the north and south of India have a lot in common, which makes us think they're all part of one big family. And guess what else? Lots of people who the same type of building blocks called Indian DNA have traveled from India to live in different parts of the world. So let's put on our explorer hats and discover more about the real Indian people. Some folks reckon that the Aryans might be the original Indians, not the Dravidians. This here idea is dubbed the Aryan theory, and it suggests that the Aryans, not the Dravidians, the first to settle down in the vast Indian subcontinent. Now, it ain't set in stone that these Aryans hailed from Europe, you see. The truth could be somewhat twisted. Let's take a gander at their distinctive traits. Just like the Dravidians, the Aryans also have their own unique features which set them apart. But what's truly fascinating is the commonalities between the North and the South Indians. You'd think they're as different as chalk and cheese, but that ain't entirely true. There's this certain DNA type, haplogroup R1A1AM17, common amongst a whole lot of folks, both North and South. Now, some speculate that maybe the migration of the folks with this here DNA actually started from India, not the other way around. Ain't that something? Delving deep into the world of genetics, we find this so-called Aryan genes. These here genes are present in high numbers in the Aryan population. The studies also show there's a significant genetic difference between the Aryans and other groups in India. This suggests that the Aryans have a unique genetic lineage that's separate from other Indian folks. These genetic studies also reveal a high degree of genetic continuity amongst the Aryans. This continuity hints that the Aryans been living in the Indian subcontinent for a long time, perhaps even since the days of yore. So, in conclusion, the Aryan theory, backed by physical characteristics and genetic studies, suggests that Aryans, with their unique features and genetic markers, might indeed be the original inhabitants of the Indian subcontinent. But is this theory the gospel truth? Or could there be another angle to this story? There's a theory that the original inhabitants of India, the Aryans, came from Europe. This idea has led to a lot of debates, so we're going to take a closer look. It's said that when these Aryans from Europe arrived in India, they had a huge impact on the culture and language of the country, especially in North India. If you look closely, you might notice that North Indians have similarities with people from Persian, Iraq, Arabian, Egypt, Morocco, and even Italy in the way they look and their facial features. But it's not just about. Scientists have found that the DNA of North Indians has common features with people from these places, suggesting a shared history. But don't get it wrong, these findings don't unequivocally confirm that Aryans from Europe are the original Indians. In fact, India's genetic makeup is quite diverse, showing that the people living here have a mix of different genetic backgrounds, not just the Aryans. It's also important to remember that the Aryan theory doesn't quite explain the entire story of India's diversity. The South Indians share many commonalities with the North Indians, despite being geographically distant. Mutual shared ancestry hints at a more complex historical narrative beyond the Aryan theory. Interestingly, the migration of haplogroup R1A1A, which is often linked to the migration, might have even begun in India, not Europe. So the question remains, who are the real Indians? Even with all the available information, it's still a bit of a mystery. To answer this question, scientists have turned to genetics. With the advent of advanced genetic testing, we've been able to delve deeper into the history of human migration and ethnicity. Many genetic studies have been conducted, each one adding a new piece to the complicated puzzle of the Indian subcontinent's genetic heritage. Geneticists have analyzed samples from various populations across India and sequenced their DNA. The results have been fascinating, revealing a complex tapestry of genetic intermingling that has taken place over thousands of years. One of the most significant findings is the presence of two major ancestral populations in India: the ancestral North Indians, or ANI, and the ancestral South Indians, or ASI. The ANI are genetically closer to Middle Easterners, Central Asians, and Europeans, while the ASI are distinct from other known populations outside India, suggesting they represent the original inhabitants of the subcontinent. Further studies have shown that most Indian groups have a mixture of ANI and ASI ancestry, with the proportion varying widely across different regions and communities. This suggests a long history of population mixing and movement within India, challenging the simplistic Aryan-Dravidian divide. Another intriguing discovery is the presence of R1A1A, a Y chromosome haplogroup in a high proportion of Indian males. This haplogroup is also prevalent among Eastern Europeans and Central Asians, leading some to argue for an Aryan migration into India. However, the story is not so straightforward, as there is evidence of this haplogroup in India well before the supposed Aryan migration. Moreover, a study on mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the female line, showed a high degree of diversity among Indians. This indicates that Indian women have been genetically diverse for a long time, suggesting a deep indigenous history. So what do these genetic studies tell us about who the real Indians are? They tell us that the Indian subcontinent has been a melting pot of different people and cultures for thousands of years. They tell us that the simplistic narrative of Aryan invaders and Dravidian natives doesn't hold up to genetic scrutiny. They tell us that the concept of pure Indian genes is a myth. We are all a blend of different ancestries. Genetics has provided us with some answers, but it has also raised new questions. The quest to understand our origins is ongoing, and each new discovery adds another layer of complexity to the story of the Indian people. But one thing is clear: the genetic heritage of India is as diverse and rich as its cultural heritage. Who are the real Indian people? Is a big question that people talk a lot about. We've been learning about two theories, the Dravidian and Aryan theories, and what our genes can tell us. But it's a bit like trying to figure out a giant jigsaw puzzle. The Dravidian theory says that the first people in India were the Dravidians. You can spot Dravidians by their dark skin and typical Indian looks. There are a lot of signs that support this theory, like what we find when we dig up old places and what we can learn from their languages. But it doesn't explain all the different types of people who live in India. Then there's a different theory about people called the Aryans. This theory tells us that the Aryans came to India from Europe and changed Indian culture a lot. Some people think this theory makes things too simple. They say it doesn't show the real story of how people moved around and different cultures mixed together in the past. Our genes can tell us many things, but they don't always agree. We know that Indian people have many different genes, but we can't find one gene that all Indians share. What we find is a beautiful mix of different genes, like a tapestry, showing how diverse Indian people are. It's also interesting to see how much North Indians look like people from Persia, Iraq, Arabia, Egypt, Morocco, and even Italy. This tells us that, in the past, people moved around a lot and shared their cultures with each other, making our world very connected. So, who are the real Indian people? It seems like Indian people are like India, different, complicated, and full of many cultures. The stories and culture of India have made a special mix of people. None of them are the real Indian alone. Each of them has their own way to be Indian. Even more interesting is that some people who live elsewhere in the world have Indian genes. This shows that people moved from India to other places a long time ago, carrying their genes with them. This is like a great adventure story of our ancestors. So remember, we're still trying to figure out the whole story. The Aryan invasion theory might be true, or it might not be. But both North and South Indians share a lot in common and make India the beautiful and diverse country it is today.